Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast presented by Callaway Golf. Our platform brings you, the Hoops fan, deep inside the playing careers and personal lives of past players and coaches in Australian basketball. From World Championships to Olympics to the adversity of careers cut short, we explore it all direct with the players themselves. I'm John Casey. Here's your host, Andrew O'Brien.
G'day Hoops fans, welcome to this episode of the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast. This week we have former owner of the South Dragons, Mr. Mark Cowan, a great businessman in his own right, and he takes us through everything from acquiring a team license to starting the team to taking them all the way to the NBL Championship in 2008-2009. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on and making some time.
Thank you, my pleasure.
The reason I guess we wanted to get you on is we've had a few of the players that played back in the South Dragons time the pod. We've had coaches on. We've had last week we had Big Joe, team manager up at Illawarra. And obviously we try and get as many perspectives as we can. And the reality is that in this modern era, that most fans especially would play fantasy leagues or something like that where they can, I guess, dream of being a team owner. And you've obviously had the opportunity to be one, and not just that, for those that may have only followed the league recently, was a team owner in a very unstable, tumultuous time, and we're going to sort of relay back to that towards the end, because for those that'll be listening to this, there was actually when the South Dragons dissolved, there was a statement that you put out that, to be honest, has almost come to fruition to a T in terms of how the league is now. So had the right direction and the recommendations, and obviously a lot of the credit goes to Larry for implementing them. But what you suggested the league needed to do, they've essentially done. And we have the league the way it is today. So I think you should take huge credit for that. But what we'll do is, I guess, when it comes to owning a team or being part of an ownership group of a team, and obviously every experience is going to be different depending on, what the team is, what the circumstances are. What made you want to be in the ownership group of an NBL team, and especially in that era?
Sure. It's a good question. I suppose the question is really why. Why would you do it?
Yes.
And I think the short answer is, because I felt it needed to be done. I've always been someone that likes to, find potential and help realise that potential. I'd grown up in Melbourne and seen the halcyon days of the NBL when, the Magic and the Tigers were playing at Rod Laver Arena and just sold out crowds. And it was, I suppose it was on the back of really Michael Jordan, and basketball was on the rise. I knew people in the AFL that had set up a committee to counter the rise of basketball.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So the AFL was really worried about basketball being really good, and then obviously it kind of all seemed to fall apart. Originally Melbourne had 4 teams. And basketball was flying back in those days, we were just talking about. But when we were contemplating coming in, basketball was on its knees and it looked like the league was in danger of folding. As I mentioned, I've always loved a challenge. I thought Melbourne deserved a second team. I thought it needed it. Melbourne's the sporting capital of Australia, and we only had one team. And I felt like we had the opportunity to get the league back onto the right track and help save the league by bringing fans back, by connecting with the grassroots instead of just the rusted-on historic fans, which were still important, obviously, but, get people that were playing the game, because there's so many people at grassroots that play the game, at all levels, but especially in championship and, out in the, under 16s, under 14s, under 18s, all those guys and girls, and get them coming along to the game. So get some younger fans there. and recognizing that basketball was is entertainment like any sport, and we're not competing just with other sports for eyeballs and bums on seats. We're competing with other forms of entertainment. And I think the other reason why is really to do with a more personal reason, which was family. So my two boys, I've got two boys, both of them played basketball, both of them loved it. And a friend of mine once gave me the advice that if you want to have a great relationship with your kids, find out what they love doing and do it with them. So I probably took that to a further extent than most people. But, also in business, I've always thought if you can accept what the downside is of making a decision, then you can move forward with it. And I felt that, my business was doing well. I felt that, if the worst happened, and it was a financial disaster, that, I would survive and I wouldn't lose my family or my home. So they were the important things. And then I just went for it. So in essence, that was the reason.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And all those values that you just mentioned about, embracing grassroots, finding a community, not just the rusted on sort of fans and being entertainment. I think that's something that, if I correlate it back to today's terms, that's something that the Tassie Jack Jumpers have actually done in a similar vein. And I guess one of the questions, and I'll sort of jump all over the place here, but is that, when you're looking for entertainment and you're looking for, appeal to the Australian fans and those within a community, you look at the kind of players that also were recruited, especially in the year that you won the championship, obviously, Brian Goorjian, but you're talking those working class players like Mika Vicona, Adam Gibson's tough,
Reece Carter.
Reece Carter, famous with that Chris Anthony. And you built that rivalry because we did need the two teams. And I'm a lifelong Tiger supporter, but even I can appreciate that 5-game series because there was like genuine rivalry and it had all come to a head. And I think what needed to be achieved had been achieved. And it was like war. And it did kind of feel like those days when you had the 1993 like Magic versus Tigers, that sort of feeling where it was like, it was fierce, and you didn't want to, it was just a tough environment. And I think that's what the Jack Jumpers have done down there. And I think obviously the Southeast Phoenix putting a lot in the community and things like that. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier in terms of the grassroots side of things, you made a very poignant. I can remember at the time because I was only about 20 at the time, and you said any Victorian that's playing college basketball is on our list, and I think having that connection with community and those sort of things, it came across as very, very evident, in terms of bringing those back. So I know I sort of went off on a tangent there, but I just wanted to allude to that because I think it was obvious from the outside. Obviously, you from the inside were trying to achieve that, but it was definitely, and then, the Joe Ingles, recruiting the best young talent, in Australia, it all made people want to go to it. It wasn't simply a bought team as such. It had a lot of that feel about it. Now, it's one thing to obviously have that idea and the family values and build a team. But I guess if I can speak on behalf of the everyday Joes and the fans, what do you actually do when you decide you want to have a team? Is it as simple as applying for a license? What do you do? Because a lot of people would be wondering, how do you actually take action on it?
Yeah, sure. I suppose that starts with the idea and the ambition to do it. And what I suppose a quick history, South Melbourne Magic, which we talked about just before, had become the Titans. And when the Titans had folded, they'd gone into receivership. my business had been involved with the Titans. We were a sponsor, and so we knew the people there. Ned Coaten, who runs the board at the moment for the NBL, of Basketball Australia, sorry, he was running the Titans at the time, and we actually applied to the NBL, or to the Basketball Australia, to take over that license. So that was a few years prior to us actually entering the league, and the decision process that what they went through at that time was, rather than choose myself and my partner, who was really important to it. I'll just quickly talk about him, Rafi Gaminda, who is an amazing and successful businessman in his own right, had come on board as a silent partner, and he was really the perfect silent partner because he had money, but he really gave me the, I suppose, the authority and the ability to put this all together and run it. And he was just really supportive in the background and really helping pull some strings to make things happen. So it was Ruffy and I that tried to take over the Victoria Titans, and the board chose to go with a group of 11 individuals who had all promised to put $50,000 in each. And that's how the Victoria Giants were launched. And that got into trouble in about 2 weeks because none of them, not none of them, but very few people actually contributed the money. So it was a bewildering decision, and typical really of the mess that was the league at the time. They were just lurching from disaster to disaster in reality. Then they were kind of rough. They were rescued. The Victoria Giants were rescued by, what's his name? Mr. Ryan who owns Jayco.
Oh, Jerry Ryan, yeah.
Jerry Ryan, who'd been a big supporter of basketball, had supported, like the Dandenong women's team and the league for a long time. He'd taken it over, and then he decided to exit the league. They didn't go broke. He paid all his bills, but he went out, and he had actually still had a license under what was the agreement at the time. So we approached him to buy his license. But we still had to get the support of the league to come in. And interestingly, Seamus McPeak, who was the owner of the Tigers, was really supportive of us coming in and creating that second team. So the Tigers from day one were fierce competitors on the court, but behind the scenes, we were actually quite collaborative, which was really good because it helps you create that tribal kind of like warfare that sport needed.
Is that because they recognise the need for rivalry too?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Seamus was a passionate individual, and he'd done a lot for, I think for the sport and for the Tigers, and he certainly recognised that. And we had our moments too, because he's a passionate individual. But yeah, so then that's how we got our licence. It all started from there. So that's really the background. But there's lots of politics and other things. At the time, the NBL board was made up of the owners. So each ownership group typically was represented by one person. And then, so we got onto that board, and that's how you would make decisions. It was really just a quorum of people together making decisions. And it's not the ideal model because people really typically vote on whatever is personally good for their interests. But there was some, there was still some passion for actually doing what's right for the league. It's just we all had different opinions about what was right. And that becomes kind of academic. But behind the scenes, that was kind of what went down. It took a long time to get it across the line. But, that was really, in a lot of ways, that was just business.
And something you're used to, obviously, because it's your background. When it comes to, I guess, then you get the license, so you're looking at sort of establishing a front office. Are you putting in a plan that might take 12, 18 months to execute. How long was it actually between sort of getting the license and then, I guess, a team coming to fruition?
Yeah, not long.
Right.
We had once we got the go ahead, I can't remember exactly how long it was, but it was something like, I don't know, 8 months or something.
Right. Yeah.
It was pretty quick. So we had nothing in place. We had no venue, no coaching staff, no administration staff, no players, no plan, apart from a marketing plan, I suppose, of what we wanted to achieve. So there was a number of experiences that we went through, which I'll just kind of run through. I just put together a quick list before we jumped on.
Yeah, sure.
And this is the list of kind of stuff that happened over the time. So the first thing we had to do was find a co-owner in Rafa Gaminda. So that was interesting. And as I said, he was the perfect partner. Then there was signing the team. So we went up to the AIS to see Paddy Mills, Nathan Jawai, and those guys all running around. Then we signed Joe Ingles as our first player. We signed Shane Heel. We signed the rest of the Aussie players. We signed our first imports, including Todd Fuller, who was in his draft year. He was drafted ahead of Kobe Bryant. It was an amazing draft year that year.
Yeah.
There was Hall of Famers that came out of that year, but he wasn't one of them. Launching the team and doing my first press conference. I didn't even know I was going to do it, and I stood up in front of all the press and had to make up what I was saying, but I just spoke from the heart, which was really interesting. Then signing Michelle Timms was actually really good. She gave me a call just after we bought the team. I think she heard, an interview on radio or something, and I was always a big fan of Michelle. And she was incredibly important to the culture because she had gone through a period with the national women's team where they had been a bit of a mess, and then they decided, how are we going to succeed? And doing that, and she just put her heart and soul into it. And she was one of the people that really helped elevate the rivalry with the Tigers and really brought that passion out in the community, which was fabulous. Then signing Dennis Rodman for an exhibition match, which was great. And then we had to do a press release that was basically all lies, saying why we didn't go ahead with it. But basically, the NBL had rung me up and said, "Don't do it. He's got to bring the game into disrepute." And it would have been the best thing. And I still regret to this day that I caved on that, because if we'd have had signed Dennis Rodman for a match, and I had his signature, I still got his signature on the paper.
Yeah.
So he agreed to play. He'd agreed to do signings of autographs afterwards. It would have been fantastic for basketball. It was just, again, so short-sighted and represented what where the league was at that time. It just had its priorities wrong. Well-intentioned, but it was a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it sounds like it wasn't very progressive and a little bit frustrating, to be honest. In terms of setting their ways. I guess with what you just said there, for anyone that's in business that's listening to this might wonder, are you spreading yourself pretty thin? Because it sounds like at that point you're pretty hands-on. Was your own business at a point there where it was kind of pretty automated, where you could spend a bit more time on the Dragon?
Good question. I thought it was.
Right.
And the way I'm wired, I really throw myself into something. So I became very hands-on with the team. And it was probably 90% of my time was being involved with setting up, running the team, making sure that it was, I suppose, everyone was on track, including the administration staff. We all operated as a team. We're all bound by common values. We all knew what the goal was, which ultimately the goal was to win a championship, but it was also the way in which we wanted to do it, what we were trying to do within the league, how we wanted to engage with the fans, how we wanted to represent ourselves, and all those kind of things. And so what turned out was, it's actually, from a business point of view at the time, it was actually a disaster for my business. Because it went from being a really successful business that was growing to no longer being that. But I still don't regret it. And I probably wouldn't have done anything different if if I had my chance all over again, because I just believe if you're going to do something, do it once, do it properly, and be, committed to what your goals are and go and get them. And we were lucky enough to be able to achieve that, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. Do you, I guess while we're on the sort of personal level about your business and then having the team, the other side of it is, whilst everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people would love to have their own team, the reality is you also see even on the outside, the flip side of it, where you're seeing, like now with the Adelaide 36, where everyone's coming for the team owners in terms of the club not doing so well. Craig Hutchison was really copying it about 5-6 weeks ago because Perth was struggling early on. So I guess there's two sides of it where it is nice to have it, and then probably three sides, but because I'm not sure what it's like these days, but quite a few owners, maybe not so much in the NBA, but in sports in Australia, whether it's A-League or NBL or whatever, would contend that it can be a bit of a money pit, a bit like buying a yacht, and it's just putting money in, and you're probably not going to see a lot of profit. I think it was only a couple of seasons ago they said Larry was still supporting the league with personal finances, even though it obviously looks great on the surface. There's a lot that needs to go into it. I guess did business and the rigors of politics of business and that hold you in good stead for when there was pressures and all that sort of stuff coming? Because for those that don't remember, there was obviously at the start of the first season, maybe not controversy, but I spoke to it with Matt Shanahan and Jacob Holmes and that, Mark Price coming into the league and then it not really working out. And then, one Shane Hill talking to the media saying against the coach, and then the coach saying that he'd never been double crossed like that before in his life. And so these are all things that on the outside, we may never get the truth. And it probably doesn't matter, to be honest. But on the inside, obviously, these are things you've got to deal with. Do you think your business life held you in good stead for stuff like that?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think you learn all the time. Speaking about Mark Price, I still hold Mark Price in incredibly high regard. Mark was probably he had so many amazing experiences in his career, playing against Michael Jordan. He actually lived at our house, as did Joe Ingles for a while. So Mark used to, he'd won the 3-point shootout at the All-Star game. I think he was point guard in Dream Team 2 at one stage. Incredibly, had his jersey retired from both the college and his NBA team, Cleveland Cavaliers. And he used to go we had a court in our backyard, a small indoor court. He used to go out to the backyard every morning and shoot, I don't know, like 100 foul shots every morning, free throws.
Yeah, right. When he was coaching, okay.
And he wouldn't leave till he did 100 in a row.
Jeez.
And his brother Brent came out with him as well. Brent Price also played in the NBA, and they used to do these kind of like crazy games against each other where they were doing 3-point shootouts against each other. That was lots of fun. It was an incredible time. But the hardest thing I've probably ever had to do in my life was actually sacking Mark Price. And the whole situation, without getting into the detail of it, between Shane and Mark was challenging because it was really obvious they both couldn't exist in the same space. And so there really had to be a choice made between who are you going to back. And both people and former players, or Shane was still playing, had amazing careers. And then I suppose as part of the Mark Price thing, he'd also brought in Todd Fuller, who was in his draft year went ahead of Kobe Bryant, and I think he went at number 11 in the draft that year. I think Allen Iverson went at number 1. I don't know where Kobe went, number 15 or something. Shane didn't believe in the American big man, so he wanted Todd gone because he didn't think it suited the Australian game. Now, whether he was right or wrong, who knows? But that was probably the start of the challenge between the both of them, and then it grew from there. But having to have the conversation with Mark, who was an incredibly nice guy, and a storied player, was really difficult. We'd lost our first 6 games of the year. We had a board at the Dragons, and everyone on the board was supportive of moving Mark on. It was really unfair, I think, to have to move him on because he deserved a chance. One thing that I don't think many people, if anyone, knows is Mark had offered to come back and play.
Wow. Okay.
Which would have been cool.
Absolutely. How old would he have been at that time?
I don't know. He'd been retired for a couple of years, but he was certainly capable of it.
And at what stage was this? Do you remember? Was this because the team had been losing, or?
Yeah.
So that's when he offered. Okay.
So when and there were some challenges with the way he was going about coaching. This was his first coaching gig. There's no doubt that he had some things to learn. He was also going to bring over an NBA assistant coach to help him. So he was doing things to try and turn it around, but there was really the culture was off to a poor start, and we had to make a choice. And so I had to have a conversation with Mark. It was a little bit like shooting Bambi. And I still, there was a very emotional time for me and for him. And I think it was unfair, but it's just how, sometimes that happens in life. You get put in situations that are not of your making, and who knows what would have happened if he'd have stayed on, but that's not what happened.
Yeah, I guess you just move on from that. Do you know if he went and coached anywhere beyond that?
Yeah, he moved back to the NBA. He was shooting. He became a shooting coach he went to a couple of NBA teams, but in specialist roles, more as a shooting coach than a coach. And I'm not sure what he was doing, what he's doing now. It's a pity that the relationship obviously took a turn for worse after then, but I still hold him in incredibly high regard. So hopefully he's doing well.
Yeah. No, 100%. I guess I'm just cognizant of time as well, Mark, but I guess we'll sort of, over the span of sort of 18 months, things change. You obviously, go from a wooden spoon team in the second season to winning the whole thing in the third season. And I guess, for those that are listening as well, there was a time there where there was new opportunities come up in terms of Brisbane and Sydney folding, and obviously an incredible player in his prime, Mark Worthington, becomes available. When you talk about culture, let alone skills, I think from the outside, I mean, you obviously know him personally, but from the outside, he seems like a great culture guy in terms of blue-collar worker, just come in, get it done, not ego-based, those sort of things. And then when you combine with who else you had in that team, it was going to be hard because the other teams were pretty good too. I mean, we talk about the instability of the league. It doesn't mean the teams were poor. Like, the teams had some good players.
Yeah.
The strength of the performance, it was more just the structure of the thing. And it was different times too. I mean, I think you guys were playing out of High Sense, which is now John Cain. But there were certainly many games in smaller venues. State Netball Hockey Centre for the Tigers, MSAC for you guys, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I remember Adam Gibson saying he loved playing at MSAC, because just like the bloody environment was off its chops, and going bonkers, So I guess, do you have any comments to make on sort of the turnaround? Obviously, getting Brian Gorchin is a big thing. But what was it like, I guess, from the inside for you in terms of, because that's a massive flip. I don't think many sports have seen that anywhere. Maybe Tottenham Hotspurs in the EPL or something, where you flip it from last to first. Was there anything that particular that went on at that time where you feel like a penny dropped?
I think there was probably 3 lessons that I learned that could be applied to sporting teams and also to business. And it's, often people talk about the difference between sport and business, that they're very different, but fundamentally they are the same at a very base level of trying to achieve goals. And I think the 3 things that were in common, that were lessons out of it, were, one, you had to have the right plan. And that was something that we agreed on. All the members of the team had to know what their role was and execute that. And when I talk about the team, it's not just the team on the court, it's also the team off the court. And then, so the right team, everyone buying in, the whole team buying into the plan, the right plan, then making sure everyone's accountable. And the last thing is you have to actually work as a team. So it has to be about team success. And when you put those 3 things together, if you can do it in business or in sport, that's the foundation that leads you to success. And I think, Brian was incredibly critical to achieving that. He was the one that put the plan in place, and then, made sure that people were accountable, and then also build an environment where everyone worked as a team towards a common goal, which we were all clear about. And I think, that was one of the things that I loved about my time. I think it was, probably one of the most enjoyable times of my life, with the Dragons. Exciting, but really rewarding. And I think rewarding because I felt like I was part of the team and I was treated like part of the team. And I loved that. I got to be in the rooms when Brian was, preparing the team for the individual games, especially during the championship season, series, and during those 5 games of the actual championship, and hearing how he prepared them and seeing how he did it individually with each individual player. Like, he treated every player different. Like, he'd give Joe Ingles a tap on the bum and encourage him, and he'd get into Mark Worthington's face and tell him, the reality of the situation. And both amazing players. So it was, it was pretty special.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, certainly from the outside, I think what you just said, us as fans noticed as well, because when I put up this week on our socials that you were coming on, most people knew exactly who you were. And there's, they have to look up South Dragons, and there's those of you with the championship trophy and Mark Worthington and those sort of things. And the guys that we've had on have had nothing but positive things to say that, hey, there it is. That's the first for the podcast. We got the championship trophy right there. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Just to rub it into a Tiger supporter. No, but 100%. And I think what you said there about the business and sport being the same, and defining roles and those sort of things, would you say that maybe that wasn't established early on in that first season, in terms of maybe there were people there with, whether it's egos or whether they just hadn't had their role defined clearly, or there was in essence, that was the issue. The team was kind of divided in a lot of ways, and whilst the goal was, the ultimate goal was clear for any team, which is you want to win the whole thing,
you have to do those three things, and we weren't doing them.
Yeah, 100. Because I mean, at the end of the day, everyone wants to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's what you've got going on there. I guess when we look at how far the league's come in just the last 10 years, and in case that wasn't obvious to anyone, the South Dragons did dissolve after that championship win. I'll post it up on the show notes, the statement you put out at the end, because obviously, as you mentioned, that was bittersweet. But the comments you made were very, very constructive. And it certainly didn't come across. I mean, I don't know if it was the case, but it didn't come across as, you'd necessarily run out of money or something was lost or whatever. But the structures and the I guess the foresight wasn't in place for it to be sustainable. And to be honest, if things didn't change, then things wouldn't have changed in terms of there would have just continually been teams coming in the league, going out of the league, etc. And there's about, I don't know off the top of my head, but there must have been 6 or 7 points you might remember that you made about marketing the league, about the financial stability of the league, about having a team in every capital city. And obviously we've now got one in Tassie. You pretty much nailed everything except having the Next Stars program. And I think it just took someone to come in and put those things in place. And now that they are, we've got what is an incredible product. And to be honest, I'm not sure if South and Phoenix have consulted with you, but I think it would be worth their time getting you in, just in terms of not necessarily employment or whatever, but just in terms of consulting, because the reality is you took exactly what they're trying to achieve and won a championship within your first 3 years, which is obviously something that they're sort of getting up towards bridesmaids level, trying to get that rivalry going, getting those tough plays. I think Mike Kelly's done a good job of that now in terms of getting in those like grunty type blue collar guys and getting out to the community and those sort of things. Because I think South Dragons would have been brilliant like right now. But I mean, it is what it is. And I guess it sort of begs the question, is it something that, you would be open to in the future in terms of getting back in with the NBL and as a team owner or something like that?
Yeah, we certainly, we've looked at it. At one stage, we were working with the Richmond Football Club to bring a team back in, and the NBL had actually approved that.
So it would have been affiliated with Richmond?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if we called ourselves the Tigers. That might have seemed a bit hypocritical. If the circumstances line up, if the planets line up, then you wouldn't say never. It's probably unlikely. After the Dragons decided to withdraw from the league, and basically the issue that we had was that we didn't feel the model was right.
Yeah.
I think Larry's done an amazing job, but I think the model still needs to be improved, because ultimately you need the teams, the individual teams, to be able to be profitable, and the model doesn't really support that well. And ultimately, what will fix it is if you look at most professional leagues in the world, the salary cap, the total salary cap of each team is paid for by the media income.
Right.
That's how you can make it work. And then if you can make money on the side from merchandising, from if you can own your own stadium, those kind of things. That's what really then can make you into a really powerful and successful, financially successful franchise. That was the reason that we ultimately decided to withdraw from the league. But if the right circumstances happen, we'd think about it again.
Yeah, I think regardless of whether you do it again or something like that, your wealth of knowledge just over the last 40 minutes in terms of lessons learned, the networks that need to be put in place, and just your level head as well. I think that can be surprising as well to some people, not because of yourself, but I guess because of you see, and obviously, you're well known throughout Victoria and Australia, and you've obviously got business over in London and Beijing and those sort of things, and incredible businessmen. But is the way people speak of you is, and the way you come across is very compassionate, very level-headed, those sort of things. And the reason I bring that up is not to pump up your tires, but obviously we see, whether it's the Sydney Kings owner or Hutchie or a lot of the owners, it can be very or just come across as very ruthless and very ego-driven, and maybe they do have reasons that they want to grow the league and they're passionate about it, but the reasons you list at the start in terms of being into something that your sons were into, just something that you saw, something the community needed, that it was big at grassroots level, and there were people that would come if you built it. There's not a lot of people with that in terms of ownership that seem to come across. So I guess the last question I have for you, Mark, is, and I'll bring up Craig Hutchison again because he's probably one of the more prominent owners, is he says, and he's got a number of different team ownerships, he says that owning a sports team is the greatest feeling he's ever had. Now, granted, he doesn't have children, so we might put that one aside, having your first kid. But personally, when you look back on it now, and you said you wouldn't really change much, was it a great feeling? Was it, rocking up to the stadium and seeing your own team, and then that fulfillment of the ultimate glory? Is it one of the great feelings?
It is. I think when anyone looks back on their career or thinks about their career and their life, if you can be part of something that you feel you're creating something really special, that's really fulfilling. And that's what we felt we were doing. We felt like we were doing it for the right reasons. We felt like, and I say we because it wasn't just me. It was a team. It was, my partner. It was the players. It was the administration staff. It was everyone. All threw themselves into, let's make something great. If we do this right, we have the ability to create something great. And I suppose the only regret I have in the whole thing is that we didn't continue. After we had won the whole thing, we had a dinner in at the Crown, and with all the players and Ruffy and myself and the coaches, and we planned. Everyone was bought in to go again the next year, and I think we would have been able to have a real chance at success again, and create a bit of a dynasty. And who knows what would have happened, but it would have been great to be able to do that. And that's probably the only regret. Circumstances meant that we made a decision to withdraw from the league. But it would have been great to keep the team together, and
there's a strong
see if we could do it again.
Yeah, there's a strong chance you would have gone back to back. I mean, you had incredible team, incredible culture, but I think it's just great that you got the trophy next to you. I think it's one of those things that you should, look back and be proud of sort of what you've done, because it's something that you're probably one of only, 10, 12 people in Australia can say they've done. I mean, these days, I think half the NBL owners are overseas based anyway. So,
there's one other thing that I'm really proud of, and after I finished with the team, I joined Jacob Holmes and became the deputy chairman of the Players Association, and there was obviously a lot of things to do there in terms of helping get the situation so it was sustainable for people who are semi-professional or the girls to get a collective bargaining agreement, etc., happening. But what I wanted to really achieve there was to support the sport in a way that allowed our men's team to win a medal at the Olympics. And I was doing everything I could to make sure we had the right coaching support, we had the right financial support, etc. And I'm really proud of playing a part in the background of helping us get to the point where we won that, that bronze medal and had our World Cup moment. And for the sport, I think that's been pivotal. It's been transformational because now, I'm so proud of our Australian players overseas, just how many we've got in the NBA and playing in Europe. We're really regarded as a rich source of great players now, which we weren't in the past. You had Bogut and Luke Longley, obviously. And by the way, Bogut was on the Players Association as well, and he's a remarkable human being. I really got to know him then, and he's a good man. But to be able to be part of that and see where the sport is now, it's got a big future in front of it. And I really hope it goes on, that we can get the NBL to a point where it can be, it can be sustainable from an individual team's point of view, that we can get some media money behind it. And the product is really good now. We've got 3 imports, which really improves it again. That was something that I pushed for back in the day that we never got through, but I'm glad that they've got that now. It's terrific. So I just really hope that the sport goes on, takes advantage of the position that it's in, and becomes one of the premier sports in Australia again. And it's certainly on the rise. And let's hope it keeps rising.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I wasn't aware that you'd gone and done that beyond the Dragons. So I think that's great to acknowledge. We had Jacob on the podcast a little while ago, and obviously discussed stuff with that he'd done with Greg O'Neill, and obviously that you're now learning what yourself has put into it as well. And I can still hear the passion in your voice about basketball. So I hope people that listen to this that are in the NBL and that are involved really don't just let that go by the wayside, because, as I said earlier, sometimes it can just be picking up the phone and having a discussion and getting a different point of view. And that's what being progressive is about. And obviously you are progressive because the opposite, the traditional, just we've always done it this way, was something that frustrated you because you could see it was getting in the way of growing the sport and those sort of things. So, look, thanks so much for coming on. You've given us a perspective that very few others could give us, and you've probably answered a lot of questions that a lot of the fans had. And I think by speaking to people like yourself, we can get better educated so that when we see things happen, like CJ Bruton getting the axe, for instance, this week and those sort of things, maybe people that have listened to this will put a bit more thought, I guess, into what the processes are and things like that, rather than just sort of being keyboard warriors and those sort of things and just shooting off at the hip, because there's a hell of a lot that obviously goes into a circumstance like that, circumstances of hiring, circumstances of, well, if the coach is gone, do we completely change our philosophy? Do we, who do we bring in now? All those sort of things. And if we're better educated by listening to people like yourself, I think everyone gets better. Fans get better. People who are listening to this that are coaches get better. And then it leads to something like you've just talked about, winning a bronze medal, and now getting to a point where there might be some Aussies playing in the NBA that don't even get in the Boomers team. Which is amazing. Who would have thought we'd get to that point when we used to just have a party because we got a player in the NBA. Now we've got guys in the NBA that can't make the Olympics team. Just phenomenal. But look, I've taken up enough of your time. But thanks so much for coming on.
One last thing, Andrew.
Yeah, mate. Yep.
I think the really important thing about our success internationally that we're starting to have now is that if you're a 6-year-old playing down at Sandringham or wherever you're playing, you can dream now that you might represent Australia and go to the Olympics and win a medal. And to provide that pathway and that aspiration for people, that basketball is something that you don't just have to play when you're an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever, that you might be able to have a career out of it in Australia is really exciting. And I think that's where, that's something that I'm really proud of, that I've played a small part in helping facilitate that. So really good. Lovely to talk to you. The podcast, and we'll chat soon. And if anyone from another team wants to give me a ring, happy to chat with them.
Oh, that would be awesome, I think, for everyone. No, look, really appreciate it, Mark. I'll let you get back to all your other business work. And, we'll put this up, and I'm sure it'll be much appreciated. So thanks again for giving up your time.
Pleasure, and happy Christmas.
All right, you too, mate. Take care. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in future episodes. Take care.